Hey everybody, what's up? You know, I've been wanting to do something here, and let me get my seat here for a second. Make it easier for me. Okay. I've been wanting to show you something for a while. Now, I probably showed you this on one of my other accounts. But this here, as you can probably tell, is the Nintendo GameCube. I've had this almost since it came out, and it still works, believe it or not. Believe it or not, it still works. Even though we mostly use the Nintendo Wii to play most of our GameCube games now. Excuse me. You know what cough. But anyway, I'm not just here to talk about the GameCube. Because as we all know, if you have a GameCube or if you played it at a friend's or something like that, you know that the GameCube games are this, right? But let me ask you a little bit of trivia. Let me ask you this. Let me give you a little bit of trivia. Did you know that the GameCube wasn't the first gaming console to allow you to, I don't know, expand? I mean, of course, we had a lot of games in the 80s, the early 80s and all that allowed you to do expansions, like Coleco, television, you name it. They had all sorts of expansions, even to allow you to play games from other game systems. Well, the Nintendo, throughout its ages, have done the same thing. So has Sega. Sega, as we know, did a lot. You know, they did two separate expansions. The Sega CD, and then they did the 32X. And for a time, they had something that was sort of like a small compact version of the Genesis and the 32X and the CD all rolled into one or something. But anyway, they continued to do that. And Nintendo tried to get in the act as well. It's true. Nintendo tried to get in the act. Unfortunately, they couldn't find no success. See, what Nintendo wanted to do back in the 1990s, when they had the Super Nintendo, is they wanted to bring out a CD expansion to it. You know, just like Sega did. Nintendo wanted to do excuse me again. Nintendo wanted to do a CD expansion. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. What came from that though was the Sony PlayStation and of course the CDI systems. Now, Nintendo did sort of have an expansion for the Super Nintendo for a little bit. The expansion was known as the Super Game Boy. That's right, the Super Game Boy. The Super Game Boy basically, and let me give you a demonstration. The Super Game Boy was basically this. It was in the shape of a Super Nintendo game, of an SNES game. The only difference was, right where you would see like the game logo, there was a little slot that you could put your Game Boy games in. And then, all you'd have to do, pop it in, turn on the system, and away you go. That's all you had to do. You'd be playing your Game Boy games on television, courtesy of the Super Nintendo. But Super Nintendo wouldn't be the first or the Super Nintendo would be the first, but it wouldn't be the last. You see, the Nintendo 64 never had, I don't think, a Game Boy expansion. But the GameCube did. That's right. The GameCube came out with what was known as, and you can see it on the back here, I don't know if you can see that, the Game Boy Player. And basically what this thing allowed you to do, I'm going to get some tools out here for a second. what this thing allowed you to do, and as you can probably see, I'm going to try to open, take this thing off, is it allowed you to connect I guess I gotta unloosen it a little bit more. There we go. It allowed you to connect your Game Boy. It allowed you to connect this to this. Now, of course, there used to be a regular bottom to it. I don't know exactly what I did. A covering. It was a covering to this. I don't know what I did with it. But this allowed you to connect your Game Boy, allowed you to play your Game Boy Advance games, as well as your Game Boy Color and original Game Boy games on here. And that's right. You could play your Advance, you could play your Color, and you can play your regular original Game Boys on this system. Now, the way you worked it, the way it worked was like this. Right here, you can probably see the little expansion, the little connection there, right? Now, how this worked was like this. You just slip it on, like that. Get it in nice and tight. Then, you just do what I did earlier when I disconnected this, but you do it like this. Then you take the disc that is packaged in with the Game Boy player. You take the game, you put it in just like you would a regular GameCube game. You shut the top. Of course, you reconnect your system. Then you put your controllers in. And then you get your Game Boy Advance or your Game Boy game or Game Boy Color game or whatever. Put it in here. Turn it on, and there you go. You'll be playing your Game Boy games, Game Boy Advance games, and Game Boy Color games on here. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of you know about that already, but in case some of you don't know, well, there you go. And believe me, it looks fantastic. It gives you the option as well as to play it as you would regularly see it on your Game Boy game, like in a small, like little box square, or do it full screen. But anyway, that's all I have to say about the Game Boy player for the Nintendo GameCube. I just hope someday they come out with a DS connection or expansion for the Wii, but who knows. But that's all I'm going to say about it. If you got any comments, let me know. I'll talk to you all later.